announce that.
My name is Tim Schmidt, and I want to welcome you up here for this, what I think is going to be a very interesting discussion that we're bringing to you today. Let me tell you briefly how we got here. Thanks to a couple of guys who have been watching and dogging this idea of building a landfill south of town here, Darryl Brugman, Keith Runyon. They gave me something that was interesting that I had a chance to look at that was an alternative to taking care of our trash without me having to travel to New Zealand or someplace far off to do it. This one happens to be a process that our counterparts in Lake County, Indiana, the next county to our east across the Indiana state line, were doing. And Karen and I and some others went over to Lake County, and they were kind enough to give us all the time we wanted to see what they were doing over in Lake County, Indiana. I think what you're going to hear here this morning is an alternative of how to, in the 21st century, get rid of our solid waste for municipalities to handle solid waste issues. I'm not going to keep you long, but they may stay and ask questions. It's a very interesting process. Lake County, Indiana is today, we're 6 years ahead of us, 7 years ahead of us in this game. And you're going to hear some scary similarities on what they've already been through. And you're going to hear about turning garbage to ethanol. I don't have everything that I need yet, but this is a very, very compelling story that I want you to hear. So I'm going to tell you that to my left, I have Cliff Dugan. He's the attorney for the Solid Waste Management District over in Lake County. It's a governmental organization where all the municipalities sit around the table and talk about their solid waste issues. Something that we don't have here in Illinois, something that's very interesting for us to do maybe here in Kankakee County. And to my right is Jeff Langman. He's the executive director of the Lake County Solid Waste. These guys have been at it in these positions, Jeff since 1993 and Cliff since 1991. So I think they've heard probably everything that we've heard and can probably do it in their sleep. So without any further ado, please give me a warm welcome for Jeff, and we'll walk you through this process.
Thank you for having us over here today. It is a very interesting set of circumstances that I'm told you find yourself into. Cliff and I have been at this battle, if you will, for 15 years. Indiana has what are known as solid waste management districts. Lake County is one of 62 original solid waste management districts. We happen to be the largest from a population standpoint. We also happen to be the largest from a board, statutorily created in the legislature standpoint, and my operating budget is the largest as well. When we were created in 1990, we were charged with reducing the amount of waste going to landfills. And during that era, I look around and see some gray hair like mine, and we would call the garbage charge. That was the big issue. And where it really came about is at that time, Indiana had 62 operating landfills. We currently have about 23 operating landfills. Some have been filled up, some have expanded enormously. To your east, in Newton County, we have the largest landfill in Indiana, second in the United States. Owned and operated very well by Allied Waste, Allied/Republican. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that landfills are bad. Landfills have their place. I happen to be, I'm told, the only person in the country that is both certified to run a landfill as well as having a law degree. And that 50 cents will get you a cup of coffee, but it gives you a unique perspective of not only the science behind them, but also the legalities behind them. Our board consists of 27 elected officials. I have 19 cities and towns in our jurisdiction, and by statute there are multiple members from some communities, and there are single members. Not every community is represented. We have monthly meetings, and it's interesting because we have people from all political walks of life. I have Democrats, I have Republicans, I have independents, and I will tell you that in the 15 years that Cliff and I have been doing this, we, from day one, made it quite conspicuous. Guys, I don't care what your home politics are, that has no place in this meeting. Your purpose is to figure out a collective answer as what you're going to do about solid waste for the 500,000 people that live in Lake County. And I will say to you, they have done that consistently. Our board revolves. Every January we get new board members. Although the mayors of each one of the 5 communities are statutorily mandated to be there unless they have a deputy mayor. We had, at the time the district was started, 3 landfills as well as 1 incinerator. The incinerator and 2 of the 3 landfills have since closed and are, various stages of post-closure. The 1 existing landfill is a C&D or construction and demolition landfill, still functions on a very small basis, wanting to expand. I guess, and you guys kind of steer this whatever way you want, I'll give you a little history and then kind of tell you where we're at, and maybe it'll help save you some heartbreak along the way. Our board collectively made a decision to build a landfill 9 years ago. And during that time, we did a whole bunch of due diligence. We did RFPs, we had vendors come to the table. And I don't need to tell you the cast of characters. They're, pretty standard. We're Waste Management Allied, Republic, Town and Country, I think is also one. And we know all the players. And that particular proposal, or a period of time, it was quite contentious. There's a lot of money involved. Our projected landfill was going to be a whopper. And it had a projected cash flow of a little over $2 billion over its lifetime, its 20-year permitted capacity. And boy, when it got down to the doing, our board passed it by 1 vote. And anything that passes by 1 vote, I don't have to tell Anderson and a number of elected officials in the audience, it's contentious at best, as was ours. Despite most Mr. Dugan's efforts and my efforts on reminding the board of the other faction, if they didn't want to do this or had plans, there were ways legally that we could do that and not find ourselves in a massive piece of litigation. When the cameras started rolling and the press started writing, it seemed that good logic went out the window. And long and short of it is our board passed by 1 vote to overturn the vote that they had done several months before. That landed us smack dab in a massive piece of litigation that after the depositions, after the trauma, and after the massive amount of legal expense, we settled out of court for about $7.5 million. Okay? So what I say to you, if you're going to move into that direction, make sure that you have a unanimous decision to go forward, because it's real expensive. And the reality of it is we settled it, and in fact, right after that, our board made the decision that there will never be a landfill in Lake County, Indiana. It's actually part of our charter that has been adopted by IDEM, so unless they choose to redo that, which I just don't see with the current legislation to do that, we're never going to have a landfill in Lake County. With that said, what do we do with our garbage? I will tell you, we have some of the most advanced programs on the planet from a recycling standpoint. I have 23 drop-off centers for people who drop off the recyclables. We have 15 white goods and tire recycling centers. I have 3 permanent, full-time educators that educate about 70,000 kids a year in the form of what are called environmobiles. We have special curriculums that have been approved and have been national award winners. We run, as a joint venture with Porter County and Fort County, the 2 districts, counties to our east, the largest household hazardous waste collection in the country. We have our own staff, we have our semis. I mean, we just recycle a bunch of stuff, okay? With that said, it's not enough. We've been able to reduce the amount of waste that we're sending to landfill since 1990 by, depending on the argument we have with IDEM or what they'll allow, what they won't allow, between 47 to 67%. So about half. That still doesn't do us a dang bit of good, because the reality of it is we as a society continue to produce more and more waste. The national average is, about 4 pounds per person per day. We in Lake County are producing 6.5 pounds per person per day. We're recycling more, but we're producing more. And despite the education efforts, it doesn't have anything to do with that. We have a society of convenience. Most of the families that we have are two-income families. People are going to work, they're stopping at McDonald's. I'm not saying that about McDonald's. They're stopping at Burger King, wherever, and we're making the waste. And so when you look around the cost that each one of the municipalities experience, your waste disposal cost, unless your municipalities are different than ours, and I don't think they are, because Cliff and I serve on a number of national boards and have talked nationally on this issue a lot. The reality of it is that we just produce a lot of waste, and we got to figure out what to do with it. But your costs are rising. Depending on what municipality you are, your waste disposal costs will either be number one or number two largest expense that you have in your community. Second only by your personnel cost, unless you're a very unique community. So I've got 19 cities and towns over there that are just screaming because they're broke. Not only do we have a recession, but we also have the reality that everybody wants government to shrink. I'm included. My wife was tickled pink this year when our taxes went down. And, you know, that's a great thing. I work for government. But the reality of it is that how do we lessen those costs? We also have the environmental issues to deal with. As the crow flies, my house is about a mile from Lake Michigan. We're in the Great Lakes watershed. We have heavy, our district, our county transcends from Lake Michigan, where we have heavy industry, all the way down to the river, which is heavy rural, and everything in between. Because our taxes are lower, we have a massive influx of Illinois people coming across the border from Chicago. So we have a great amount of buildings, a lot of people going on, and what do we do with this garbage problem? So our board has collectively been working for years to try to solve the problem, and we decided that we weren't going to have a landfill. And the first thing they said is that we come up with the most possible maximum recycling. And we've done that. We have electronic recycling centers. We've got at no cost to the citizens. Not one dime does it cost the citizens extra than what we have as a tax levy. And by the way, we've taken a voluntary tax rate reduction on 2 separate occasions over the last 15 years. So it's not like we just keep doing these things and increasing our taxes. We really have done the right things. So, with that said, about prior to us embarking on this, I would get 3 to 5 great ideas that somebody had, the next best answer for our garbage. And typically the phone call would start out, or the visit would start out, Mr. Langman, we've got the greatest answer for your garbage. If you just write us a check for $100 million, we're there to help you. Well, we don't have $100 million. As I've already told you, everybody wants to reduce the amount of taxes, and I'm sure you all are in the same boat. What do you do? 3 years ago, one of our board members, Jerry Shue, who is a county councilman, was at an IAC conference down in Evanston. Called me on the phone and was almost hysterical. He had found the answer. And after we pulled him back out from 10,000 feet, he said, "Come down, Commissioner, let's ask a couple threshold questions." We actually thought we found somebody that was worth at least pursuing for the next discussion. He had run across a group led by an engineer by the name of Joe Wade, and his partner was a fellow by the name of Jim, patented process for waste disposal, and they had a financial guy by the name of Earl Powers, and they wanted to come see us. So we set a meeting, and about 4 days later, they showed up with an entourage of 16 people, and Cliff and I started asking questions, and the threshold questions that I wanted to know was, A, is it safe for the environment? Tell me what it costs. You know, if you're telling me that you're going to do an answer for us, and at that time our ticket fees were running about $28 a ton, if you've got an answer for me and it's going to be $64 a ton, that just isn't going to fly. So, no, they said it was, they suspected that it was going to be about a third of what our costs would be. And then, yes, it was proven that it was environmentally safe. So it whetted my appetite. The next thing I said is, well, how much is it going to cost me? And the answer is, it doesn't cost you a dime. Well, that really piqued my interest, because that was the first one that somebody said, I'm going to build this thing. At that time, Earl Powers and Joe Wade were partners. They had a process that is still in existence today, that they wanted to talk to us about, that basically consisted of putting 4 holes down in the ground about 2,000 feet, and with a combination of hydraulic pressure gasification and bacterial infusion, it was capable of producing ethanol. So we started listening to them, and as we moved forward, of course, we continued to make our board aware of discussions. They formed a committee that we were utilized a lot, consistent with what we have said on the board, and these were all elected officials. And then as we got to the first phase, they suggested, because I'm not an engineer, Cliff's not an engineer, I don't have an engineer on staff, that we contract an outside engineer. We did. We chose a fellow by the name of J.W. Spear out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the reason we chose Joe is he's got a long history in the waste industry, knows what the heck he's talking about. But he also didn't have any direct ties to the biggies. It was really hard for us to find a engineering group or a consultant group that weren't tied to the big waste haulers. Not because of the big waste haulers doing anything bad, but just because we truly wanted an independent opinion. Joe came back with his initial report that said, it works, but there are some issues. Our board was going to hear a hearing on that particular report, and the night before the hearing, I got a phone call from Earl Powers, who said that the divorce had occurred. He and Jim Titmus were no longer married. And it put us in a real dilemma. It was on the eve of the presentation, and Earl said that he wanted to present to us an alternative that he thought was better. Well, since we were so far along, we went to the committee. The committee said, well, you might as well let him present, because right at this point, we're in the interest of doing as much due diligence as we can. We're not married to anybody. So we had two presentations that night. Mr. Titmus's process, that he owns the patent on, is exactly as I said. Both processes are similar, that all the waste comes in off the waste hauling trucks, whether they're transfer trucks or whether they're rail haul, whether they're packer trucks, put on a tipping floor, and in-house, inside of one building with negative pressure, they have what's called a MRF. All of you know what a MRF is, Material Recovery Facility. It's a recycling center. It's where the majority of the recyclables are pulled out of the waste stream up front, aluminum, steel, plastic, so on, and sent into the appropriate recycling markets. It's negative pressure because if you've ever been next to a waste transfer station or a landfill, you know there's a aroma. And it allows for that aroma to be contained within the building, only discharged through HEPA filters. So literally if you're standing next to the building and the discharge, you're smelling them. And that is the case. But they're very, very similar at that point. Mr. Titmus's process then involved going through a grinder, a masticator that would reduce the size of the material, increase the surface area, and a mild acid bath, read into it, very, very mild on a pH scale. And then the material was infused with a biocode and injected into a double-wall cylinder that was perforated and was about 2,000 feet deep. And the combination of hydraulic pressure ramming it down and gravitational pressure, it falling that 2,000 feet, actually helps separate the ethanol that the bacteria have started to digest. And then the ethanol comes up the backside of the pump and then it literally bubbles out. And it's a pretty interesting process. It was actually a process that was put into a trial in Colorado, and Adolf Kurvers and some of the other single-stream waste people have gone forward with it and used it on a limited basis. It was used in the Netherlands and put into the Netherlands, and has since been dismantled in the Netherlands, and is either going to be built or not be built. But there's a lot of people who are still looking at that process. We had some initial concerns because, as I told you, I'm a mile from Lake Michigan. At the time, we were going through this great big issue on the Great Lakes watershed with all the surrounding governors about the water tables. We would have had to go through 2 water tables, plus we were in a relatively small but still realistic earthquake zone. But I forget which fault zone they called it. It was identified by Joe Spear. So there were some real issues that we had to talk about. We had not passed judgment on it one way or another at that point, and has some merits in certain climatic conditions. I don't disregard that process, but as we move through the due diligence, we found some additional issues that concern us. The second process that Mr. Powers presented us with, and now he is a second vendor, and And keep in mind, before that meeting, they were buddies. We're sitting at the same table. Now they're sitting at opposite sides of the table, calling each other names. So we had to get back to that and tell both of them, hey guys, you're both nice people. We're not concerned whether you want to kill each other. We're really more concerned about what the process does. Mr. Powers' process came out of Arkansas. It is a gasification process that is distinctly different from the incineration process. Gasification, in Mr. Powers' case, there's a double boiler, for lack of a better explanation. The waste goes in on a series of steps and is fed by hydraulic rams, and it has a head height of about 24 inches of waste, and the gasification actually occurs at that lower level. So all you have coming off the waste at the top level is truly the gases. It's at about 1,200 degrees in the lower chamber. It's ushered into a top chamber immediately where it is quick quenched and goes up to about 2,100 degrees. That separates the basal elements, the carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, whereupon they're ushered off to their appropriate points of the plant, and the carbon-based material is then fed a patented bacteria, Clostridium bacteria, that Mr. Powers' partner, who is Dr. Gaddy from the University of Arkansas, originally developed it. He was the head of the engineering department at the University of Arkansas, and that's where the technology came from. It has been running for about 40,000 hours down there in their pilot plant. If any of you want to go see it, we'll make arrangements. You can go through it, you can kick the tires, you can put the garbage in one end and watch the ethanol come out the backside. It genuinely does work. And that process is a much more effective process than what the other process is. The Clostridium don't and cannot survive at that 2,100 degrees, so as the bacteria is shuffled across, it's quick quenched to about just under 100 degrees. Clostridium's injected into it. It feeds on the carbon-based material and has an 8-hour regeneration. In other words, those bugs are dying non-stop, they're regenerating their own bugs. And the ethanol that is produced, not to be so indelicate, but it's really by the bacteria's poop. I mean, there's no way to make it, they digest the stuff. Is then sent through a distiller, just like we all saw in freshman chemistry class. It distills it into an ethanol, and it percolates out the back end at about 80 proof. It is so effective that the pilot plant is actually as a permitted facility by alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. If you go down and see it, and I encourage you all to do that, I really do, because as much due diligence as we did up front, Cliff and I were still naysayers until we got into the facility. When you watch them put garbage in the front end, they walk you through and you see it happening. When you get to the end, they actually have to have an alcohol, tobacco, firearms person there who opens up the stopcock, puts it into a beaker, and drops a hydrometer into it, and it comes out 80 proof. You don't have any questions that you can ask at that point. You just watch it in front of your very eyes. So we became believers for a variety of reasons. After Joe Spear's report, we asked him to re-review this. He came back and said, it is as close to an off-the-shelf process as you're going to get. Not wanting to rely only on Joe Spear's, we were looking for another technical, non-biased individual, and we were fortunate enough to send it to the greatest educational institution on the planet. That would be Purdue, if any of you are questioning. Dr. Mosier, Nathan Mosier, is a PhD in biochemical engineering, who has considerable experience in this area. Nate reviewed the process, Cliff and I, and along the way, being lawyers, Cliff and I were terrified that we didn't want to just have our opinions. We picked up Barnes & Thornburg, which is one of the big 5 law firms in Indiana, and Bill Morrow, and I and Cliff met with Dr. Mosier the first time and gave him all the facts and said, tell us what you find out. It was about 4 or 5 weeks later. He called us back down, we went down to dinner, we were meeting with him, said, hey, this is the real deal. And that really kind of got us over the hump as far as the technical aspects of it. We then were very concerned that now we knew we had something that technically would work, both saw Purdue and Joe Spear give us the review on it, and seeing with our own eyes. But we weren't so sure about the financial side of it. We were a bit concerned that, okay, this is a great thing, and then, like so many of these projects that we have all seen come and go, well, we just forgot to add one decimal point, or, geez, the citizens are going to have to step to the table and write a new check for $50 million or something goofy like that. So we didn't want to have that happen. We then turned it over to Coach Chiswick, which is one of the big accounting firms. Coach Chiswick came back and did the due diligence. We went into a executive session because it dealt with some very confidential financial information on both venues. And the accountant who was reviewing it made a very nice presentation to our board. And at the end said, ladies and gentlemen, all I can tell you is that if I was allowed to invest, I'd put every cent I have into it. And that's a pretty sound and convincing thing coming from an accountant who is paid to give you an analysis as part of the due diligence. So we are very, very comfortable with not only from a technical standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint that this process works. Our board passed November 20th by a vote of 16-4 to move forward and contract for us with Powers One, which we have done. It is done on an interlocal collective purchasing agreement form that Mr. Dugan very, very aptly put together. And that's as critical a piece as anything, and I will tell you. For those of you who haven't been in the battle or are not lawyers, there are several Supreme Court cases out there that really have been constraining and also guiding at the same time as far as municipalities getting things done. The first and the prevailing case law was a case that came down out of New York about 10 years ago. It was the Carbone decision. The Carbone decision basically had a municipality not unlike ours, and like you, who decided, hey, we're going to build an incinerator. And they went out and contracted and they built this $100 million incinerator. And then they went back to all the waste haulers' property and said, you must send your waste to that facility. Well, Carbone owned a landfill just across the border in New Jersey. And he said, I don't want to do this. I shouldn't have to do this. That's my contract before I can take to my own facility. Took it all the way up, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Carbone that it was, he was absolutely correct, that garbage is governed under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution because it travels on interstate highways. And due to that, the Commerce Clause says they can't interfere with the private world. It's commerce, and they can dig wherever the hell they want. So for years and years and years and years, that was the prevalent mindset. And the waste industry built new and bigger landfills and better facilities. You know, I have to tell you, a modern-day landfill run by a competent operator is truly an engineering marvel. They are not bad. They are well-made. They are designed to do what they are supposed to do, and they have some distinct benefits. In certain circumstances, they are the least possible expensive facility that you can operate. In our case, that no longer was the case. With fuel costs going what they were, and actually engineering costs where we're at, and land costs, the tipping fee for the landfills had escalated to the point that it was no longer a competitive nature. If you get to rural Arizona, you go to the west side of Nebraska, some of the arid parts of the front side of Colorado, up through the front range of the Rockies, landfilling is not a bad alternative. I mean, they don't even have to put liners in them sometimes because their moisture is so low that there's not an issue with groundwater contamination. They have some merits. Here, and I suggest you may be in the same boat as we are, that just isn't the case. I'm not familiar with what the proposed tipping fee is on the facility that's being proposed here. But I can tell you with the modern laws we have written, and both by Region 5 EPA, overseeing what's being done by your Illinois EPA, as well as in our state, nobody's going to get away with anything. And it really comes down to what the operator is. But it just became no longer cost effective for what our purposes were. So we decided to move forward on this. And the board has passed it unanimously. Mr. Powers has now been scurrying around, acquiring locations. He is, as I understand it, and I talk to Earl probably 3 or 4 times a week, there are 3, maybe 4 parcels of final determination of where it's going to go. Interestingly enough, because the way the Lake County is situated, our population basis is on the north. He has also found a location in the south that he likes very much for a variety of reasons, and he is contemplating actually building 2 over the Lake County that will allow, because when this hit, you guys aren't alone. I mean, Cliff and I have spent full time just answering calls about people who want to do this from all over the world, from New Zealand to virtually every state in the Union to British Columbia. There's been a tremendous amount of interest, most notably Chicago. We have had probably 10 meetings with Chicago, and Chicago is extremely interested in sending their waste to this facility for a variety of reasons. One, it's less expensive. 2, it's environmentally sound, and they want to put this little sporting event together up there called the Olympics, and they get some real advantages using the environmentally sound method of their waste disposal. But the really cool thing about Chicago is that by sending the waste to this, they want to buy all the ethanol back to run their vehicles on, because they can actually end up using their garbage to power their vehicles at about, something on the order of 40% of what their cost of fueling is right now. So it has a lot of advantages for us. Whether it will work for you guys, I can't tell you that. I'm not familiar with the land, I'm not familiar with your population base, I'm not familiar with what the tipping fees that you propose on, and quite frankly, what the will of the people is over here. We had an enormous group called SCROP, South County Residents Opposing Dumps, that was well-funded, well-organized, and I mean, when we had a landfill hearing, they were there 600 strong. Cliff and I were invited to a county council meeting one time to testify as experts when this was supposed to go through. And we walked in and our room holds 600 people. And it's got an elevated seating area. So Cliff and I got up in the back behind the people. And the outer area was completely filled with people. And all of a sudden you started hearing these chants going on. And when the county council dropped the gavel and moved forward on the landfill, the people rushed the stage. We have pictures there. They're actually surrounded by county sheriffs and people rearing back. They were going to fisticuffs on the whole thing. Cliff and I chose the wild legal decision and ducked out the back door as fast as we could. But it's a very emotional. It's very visceral. I can tell you, I have a certain amount of experience of that. 20 years ago, I lived in the house in Munster, and we were fortunate enough that we had a new baby. Unfortunately, she had colic, and so I was trying to do the good daddy thing, and I was up, walking around in the early morning, and I looked out our second floor bathroom window, and there were 3 guys in moon suits behind my house, and what I had built next to that I was told was a park actually happened to be the old landfill that the city, that very next spring, decided to open again, and so I have lived next to a landfill for the last 20 years. And now I can tell you it's a gorgeous golf course. So I can speak to you very fluently about the real issues of living next to a landfill, because I am trained to operate one. I can tell you about the technical aspects. As a lawyer, I can tell you about the legality of it. And certainly with what Cliff and I have lived through for the last 15 years, I can tell you about the political and the visceral issues that come from not only elected officials, but also citizens. And you're in for a tough road. It is one of the most emotional things that I've ever seen confront local government. But I think there's some good answers out there. I can't stand before you and talk to you about this stuff if I didn't believe it. We have done every possible piece of due diligence that I know how to make sure that this process works. Otherwise, I wouldn't tell you it would happen. And I believe it will happen. As it stands today, Mr. Powers hopes to finalize the site location in about 10 days. The only reason is that our board made a decision, anything coming from out of state must come in via rail to cut down on the truck traffic. And he has a meeting with the Norfolk and Southern Railroad this week to finalize that on the location. Once that's done, we've already met with our Department of Environmental Management. We kept them abreast, given them all the reports along the way. We will do a dry run with them in about 60 days. The application will go in, and we're told from IDEM that that permit will be issued in less than 6 months because it will be handled on a processing basis. So as it sits here today, they plan to open the facility or start digging on the facility yet this year. It takes about 18 months to build it. There is an economic benefit to the facility itself. In our case, the facility is about $211 million. It will put about 400 construction people to work building the actual physical plant. And then from that time, there's about 140, 160 permanent employees that will be employed there. The low side of that, the entry level would be, they start at $18 an hour, so it's a pretty nice paying job, at least in our neck of the woods. And then it goes up to the manager of the facility, makes about $250,000 a year, and there's a number of 100,000 plus management type positions in there as well. So what's happened, interestingly enough, is we started out trying to find a solution to our garbage and an environmental sound one that was cost effective. And we also came across a great economic development project for our area. And the last thing I think that's probably the most crucial and one of the critical things that we did. When we did the request for proposals, we had a landfill operator, Allied Waste, made a proposal. Waste Management submitted a proposal that says we don't want to follow up like. And Cliff and I had, interestingly enough, before this all started, about 18 months before that, brought every known waste hauler and operator in our community into our office for meetings saying, guys, this is ridiculous. You've got, in some cases in our town, we had 4 or 5 different waste haulers driving up and down the same street, just hot-matching each other, tearing up our roads and all kinds of stuff. Why don't we go to a winner-take-all concept? Would you be interested in that? We'll use the collective purchasing concept that we talked about. We'll do an RFP. Whoever wins it gets the big McGill. And you know, it'll be more money for you. You guys don't like going through this big process. And each and every one of them said, yes, we actually want to do that. So when we did the RFP put on the street, interestingly enough, we only had Allied, who's become the predominant hauler and operator in our neighborhood, respond. And their price was $45 plus, had a couple escalators in for our $45 a ton for the waste disposal. The contract that Cliff so gallantly negotiated, and I have to pat him on the back, I don't like him very much, but I do like him. It's mutual. Is $17.25 a ton. So it is an enormous savings to our municipalities. And our mayors and our town councils are very excited about it. So that's kind of a basic overview. You have anything you want to say over your watch, or just want to ask questions?
No, you've done a fine job.
Somebody record that, because that's the first thing every time I've ever said that. But I'll take any questions anybody's got. Yes.
What financial incentive did you have to give to the company to do this?
We didn't have to give them any financial incentive at all.
No tax breaks or anything?
No. Actually, I forgot to tell you, they will be paying the standard tax rate. I should tell you, it's quite the opposite. They're paying us. The solid waste district, by statute in Indiana, can receive up to $2.50 per ton, which is what we will get. Then the host community, wherever the physical plant is at, will get 3 cents per gallon plus the property taxes. So, I can just tell you the rough number from probably the most realistic projection. The host community, once this is up and functioning, will take probably $5 to $9 million a year annually into the combination of the two. And we as a district will take in between $25,000 and $50,000 a year.
So what did you have to do to induce them to come in and do this?
We had, the collective purchasing was what it was. We generate collectively about 2,000 tons of waste, municipal waste per day. And so we had to get everybody together to say, yes, we agree as our contracts expire that we will send our waste to this new facility. Now, that's really important. I don't know how yours operate, but there's contracts in play. I am under no way, under any way suggesting that you compromise any existing contracts. That will get you in a tortious interference lawsuit that will cost you millions. So you should only do it as those contracts expire. But that's what we gave them, was our 2,000 tons of waste.
And what capacity can they handle? Unlimited?
10,000 tons a day. They can theoretically go to unlimited. These are designed in 125-ton modules, so they can theoretically just keep going. But the site that they're looking at has physical space that they can accommodate up to 10,000 tons. Yes, sir.
Now, you put trash at one end and ethanol comes out at the other end. Are there byproducts? Are there other things that need to be filtered out? And how much is that?
Well, the process in itself consumes a lot of stuff. I mean, the different elements that come off to go, and I'm not technical that can explain that to you, but I can tell you, there are certain of the elements that are ushered into the Clostridium as an example, because it makes them more efficient. But in the case of the steam that comes off of the process, because it does generate an enormous amount of steam. Garbage is wet. In the case of grass, it's 90% moisture. That steam comes off and is used to spin two turbines as well. And I think that's another byproduct of it that Mr. Powers enjoys, is to sell electricity. So those byproducts, but I forgot to talk to you a very specific thing about the environmental issue. This process is so efficient, the way that it is designed, that if you took all of the garbage that is produced in the United States for 1 year, and this was a test, an independent test that was done by the University of Chicago, or California. And by the way, we'll give you all of the stuff that we've already spent millions of dollars for, because our board wants everybody to have the same opportunity just to move this thing forward, because you're all facing the same thing. But if you took all of the garbage produced in the United States and ran it through this process for 1 year, it produces less than 2 grams of dioxins and furans, which, if you're somewhat familiar with that, is less than what you do when you barbecue on your grill on Sunday afternoon. It is an enormously efficient process. And for me to get into the very specifics of it would be foolish. I have brought, I don't know, there's 10 or 15 of these manuals that actually go into some of the more technical aspects that you might want to review. And if you need more, you can make copies of this. We didn't copyright it or anything. We also have kind of an executive summary of what it is. And there's more pages if you want.
In our process.
That's right. So you might want to look at those. But then if you have specific questions about some of the chemistry involved, there's a fellow, Dr. Gaddy's son-in-law, Stephen Adams, is actually, the way that this all started out was 18 years ago. Dr. Gaddy was an engineering professor at the University of Arkansas. His daughter got married. Son-in-law needed a job. So Dr. Gaddy said, let's start a bioengineering company. So they started, in Stephen's basement, they started doing these various different small things that they could sell, different bioengineering technologies. In that pursuit, about 5 years in, they stumbled across this Clostridium that actually consumed these carbon-based materials and was very efficient in converting it into ethanol. They, by luck, decided to isolate that and then further decided to patent it and move forward, and it turned out to what this process is. Anyhow, Stephen Adams, since this time, since our involvement in this, Ineos Chemical, which is the 3rd largest chemical company in the world, has bought Dr. Gaddy's patent for $56 million. Along with it, they bought Dr. Gaddy and Stephen Adams. Stephen Adams, and we can give you his phone number, and you can go down and see him, is the most brilliant man I've ever run across in my life. You can sit here and he can tell you not only the most minute details, he can tell you how we're continuing to refine it to make it better. But that's why I was specifically asked to talk to you. But what I can tell you, this book, as well as the bigger volume that we've gone through, it goes through, and there's virtually a very small amount of waste. This is not a 100% efficient process. Depending on the waste stream that goes through, after the recyclables are taken out, it's between 70 and 90% efficient. Okay? It produces about 90 gallons of ethanol per ton of waste that goes through. So you're still going to have, what, 300 to 600 pounds of ash or char at the end. Now, that process right now as it exists in the pilot plant has an awful lot of carbon-based material. When you look at it, it's black. In the upscale process, they're going to pull that carbon-based material back out because they can use it in the process. So once we're able to actually run a test run on our plant and do a proximate analysis on it, we have every reason to believe that it can be used for some alternatives. But there still is a need to send, as it exists today, between 10 and 30% to a landfill.
What does the rest of it look like? Sand?
It's black. No, it kind of looks like cinder.
Yeah, you said somewhere around it. Like cinder.
It's like cinder coming out of the cinder.
Yeah, to be incorporated in road material.
Well, that's what we're hoping to use as road beds. But here again, I can't tell you that until, as it comes out of the pilot plant, we can. It's got a lot of carbon in it, and that carbon, of course, will leach out the same things. If you can pull that out, which we believe we're going to be able to do in our new plant, then it is a much more benign material.
Commercially used for the rest of it.
Yeah. We have other things. They currently can use it daily coverage those road beds, those kind of things. Other questions? Yes, sir.
What kind of population base is needed to generate the number of influx that you mentioned?
We have about 500,000 people in Lake County, collectively with all the municipalities. So, and it depends on your waste
As
generation.
a follow-up, without solid waste districts in Illinois, what kind of challenges do we face getting?
What's your population? What is your population base?
170 county.
In the county, 170? 107. Partner with a couple surrounding counties, do a collective together. Because the problem is it doesn't make it economically viable until you've got about 2,000 tons weight. You can drop it down, but your gate price goes up substantially.
Did you say that you will be bringing in waste from Chicago?
Yeah, you want to send your waste to us, put it on a train, send it over. I'm sure Mr. Powers.
The point there is I think there's a prevailing attitude in the area that we should only take care of our own county. And I think you just made two important points. One is that the economic viability may not be there for that small of a population. And your system is taking garbage, quote unquote, from...
Well, I think that it's very grassroots. You know, I have 19 cities and towns. They collectively have combined to solve this answer because I don't care who you are, the garbage truck that you have in one municipality is the same as the other, and your cost is the same. So they made that decision early on. Then when you take into consideration beyond that our board said, okay, you can bring waste from outside of Lake County because it's an additional source of revenue in the county. The revenue source that we're looking at, quite candidly, it could all but eliminate the property taxes in our county if it goes the way it's planned. Now, the caveat that they made on that is it must come in by rail because we don't want that additional truck traffic. We already have that on Highway in County. So you're absolutely correct. I encourage you to partner. That is one of the salvations. We are in another interlocal agreement with Porter County and Polk County. We've been in for 12 years. That is a collective purchasing agreement, the same thing, interlocal agreement that we do our household hazardous waste collection, and it's won awards all over the country because of its effectiveness.
Let me ask a follow-up to that. So with your, what did you say, 19 municipalities and then whatever other sources you have, what is your total tonnage again?
Well, we in the 19 municipalities, just the municipal government, generates about 2,000 tons a day. There's about 4,000 tons a day in addition to that within the county that's commercial.
Okay.
That also will go for this. So that gives us realistically about 6,000, well, could go for this. You know, we have a very dear friend, the rest of his soul, who died last year, whose favorite statement is garbage will find the cheapest venue, and that's absolutely kept. So there's another 4,000 tons in the county that it stands to reason if they're paying $45 a ton, they're going to go to where they can get $20 a ton. And then outside of that, the discussions with Chicago currently has a number of contracts in place, but there's probably another 2,000 tons a day that will come from Chicago. Then as far away as South Bend, which is St. Joe County, wants to say. So when you add all of them together, and so right now the people from English, you're probably talking about 10,000 tons a day.
That's tons per day, okay. Just to put that in perspective, the city of Kankakee generates about 8,400 tons a year. So we're considerably smaller, and that's just Kankakee, and then you've got the rest of it. So what I'm trying to get across is that, in order for this to be feasible, we need to look at bringing in additional sources. Or
you may. The other thing that's cool about this process is the modular design.
Yes.
At a 125-ton facility, and I can't speak for Mr. Powers, because it is a private venture, and I under no circumstances want to make a commitment that he will even talk to you. But it is conceivable, because I know their plan is to develop 45 of these around the country. Last Friday was in a meeting for 3 hours. Honolulu wants to do one for the entire Hawaiian chain for the exact same reasons. So whether they'll commit or not, it is conceivable that you could say, well, we want to build one that's going to be a much smaller.
Yeah. Well, or fewer. Yeah. How many modules are you installing?
Well, the way that ours is set up is that ours won't actually reach full capacity for 6 years because the contracts are in there. So they will come online. Ultimately, there will be about 10 modules between 7 and 10, but the maximum they look at is about 10. And part of that is, and one of the other cool things about the modular design is, what do you do if this thing blows up? God forbid, what if there's a terrorist? Well, so the modular design, the way that ours is designed, it allows for you to bypass a broken one or one that's for repairs and send it.
Now, are they continuous feed?
They are, 24/7.
Do you foresee the major waste haulers like Waste Management using your facility?
Yes. Right now, Allied/Republic has a stranglehold on our district because they're the most effective. They got the closest landfill. If you're not familiar with the landfill operation, they follow a hub and spoke concept. They have a landfill that they own or build, and then they feed it with various routes. In the case of this, the waste industry fought us all the way along. But since that time, it's come to us and said, we'll send ours there because we can't afford not to send it to them.
That's cheap.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But those that don't have a landfill are very excited because it's going to make it more competitive. And there's another benefit, is the more competition you get, a reduced price from a competitive nature in home site.
You could be the final destination for the garbage for this whole area if you have unlimited capacity.
Conceivably, absolutely conceivably. Yes, sir.
I heard you mention yard waste. Is that, what component of your total tonnage are you anticipating to be yard waste?
Well, it's seasonal, as you might imagine. Right now, yard waste is banned from our landfills in Indiana, but it is allowed to come into this facility. Clearly, in the summer months, you'll get more yard waste. In the fall, you'll get more leaf waste. Depending on which you want to look at, about 40% could very well end up being agricultural yard type waste. That's actually a solid waste that's carbon-based. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have landscape waste facilities, and I have a couple other follow-up questions after this, but do you have landscape waste facilities in the mountain right now?
Yes. We currently have 3 compost facilities, and we have 2 more that are being proposed.
Because we have several also. And one question I wanted to ask, because the modular design of this, would that also be a benefit if we had smaller facilities that is dealing with our local garbage instead of having to pay X amount of dollars to ship it out? So it's
could very well be. I mean, that's an economic question that really depends on transportation costs, and it could very well be. It is more economically viable for you to do a 125-ton facility right here as opposed to shipping. Yeah, absolutely.
And then just one last question. What kind of skills and education levels are needed for the jobs?
I'm sorry,
Skills and education levels?
Well, it depends. They vary from entry level at the most rudimentary that you're actually going to be a hand picker on the picking line, and education level for that is actually quite low, all the way up to the management facility that will have to have advanced degrees and everything in between. In the back.
Is the charge or is the dollar that going to be hazardous waste, or is that going to be regular waste?
The residual, is it going to be hazardous? No, the answer is it is absolutely not hazardous. There's nothing in it whatsoever that is hazardous unless something comes in, which is interesting. As I told you, we have a joint venture for our household hazardous waste. So in the picking line on the front side of the bird, you're going to get some batteries that are going to come in there even though they're barred. I mean, we all know when you put stuff in the garbage, it doesn't belong there. That's the purpose of having the pick. So that hazardous material that will come out, it'll come out on the front side, and it'll be handled under our hazardous waste protocol as opposed to going out the backside. But there's nothing that comes out the backside that is hazardous whatsoever. Yes, ma'am.
So to clarify that further, we know that in this incineration process, we can't get rid of heavy metals.
Yeah.
So there are heavy metals in this lab, correct?
No, because heavy metals are barred municipal solid waste in Indiana. Now,
Okay,
if you get a trace that shows up, it's compromised in the gasification process, depending on where it's at. But if you look at the proximate analysis they've run down in Arkansas, and I have to go to that because that's the only functioning facility in the country. When you look at it, the heavy metals that may be present are so minuscule they come way underneath the threshold of even EPA standards. So I won't tell you they're not there, as you find them in whatever you get in your garbage rate today, but they're so minuscule they become a non-issue.
So this slag, with the minuscule amount of heavy metals and other toxins in it, and all of the stuff that's hand-picked at the front end of the process, where does that go?
Well, it will depend. And I don't mean to answer like a typical lawyer, but the answer is it really does depend. It will go to the marketplace that does it. Like right now, our household hazardous waste, we send to about 14 different vendors right now, and that changes on a constant basis because if one, like our oil-based paint is being shipped all the way down to Louisiana, and they use it as a fuel blend. So the answer to that is wherever the protocol that would require, if you found something in it, would be sent to the same markets that we're currently using. We're not planning on using anything different. There's nothing that we've been led to believe that there would be anything. And in fact, probably those will be very small amounts. Yes, sir.
What's the going price per gallon for ethanol produced?
The current market right
Yes.
now? I think it's running around about $1.70, something like that. As far as what you buy, if you were to pull up and buy 85.
What would be produced and generated through the trash? Is there an increased price for that generated?
No, his cost of generation is actually unbelievably low. It's about 17 cents a gallon is what the true cost of it is.
And selling that, you mentioned Chicago has an interest in purchasing that ethanol that's been produced by its own.
They want to buy all the ethanol that their producers back.
Is there any discussion on the cost of that?
Pardon?
Any discussion on the cost of what they would be willing to purchase?
Well, there's lots of discussion, but since we're in the middle of that contract negotiation, I don't know what I can tell you. I can tell you the discussion ranges from the discount off what is known as rack rate, which is the prevailing wholesale price. Chicago's looking for a percentage discount off a rack rate, and then they also want to take what's known as the blended fuel credit on top of that, which is about 50 cents a gallon. So Chicago is looking to be someplace in the $1 to $1.40 range. But to say much more than that would be...
They're discussions.
Yeah. As my learned legal counsel tells us, these are all discussions. Did that answer some of it?
Yes.
Okay. You had another question? Okay. Hold on, I'd ask you. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask you, the way I understand the process, you heat up the material. What's the power source to create the heat initially?
Other than its initial startup, it will actually be done with gas from our utility, which is NIPSCO over there. It's 100% natural. They just feed the system back into it. That's where part of the byproduct goes back in to feed the system itself.
So does it take more energy to do what you need to do than it does what you're saying?
No, it actually generates excess. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to know how much water does this take in this process, if any? And also,
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
About 1 to 1. So for every gallon of ethanol, about 1 gallon of gas, or 1 gallon of water.
okay, and also, how many acres site do you need for operation like this?
There are, I can only tell you that one site that is being considered that is about 65 acres has been deemed to be only capable of handling about 6,000 tons. The current site that they appear to be most enamored with is about 160 acres for the full facility. And generally speaking, yeah, they're looking at about 100 acres. Yes, sir.
Without a strong recycling program in many municipalities over here in Illinois, what challenges would that make in terms of this program?
Well, you're going to have real challenges, just like the lady in the back we talked about. I said there's minuscule levels of household or toxins that are going in, heavy metals and so forth. We pull out more household hazardous waste in our program than the entire state combined. And I suggest to you that if you're not pulling those toxins out, then you've got to have a really efficient program on the front load of this thing. Because, the old adage about garbage in, garbage out, it couldn't be more realistic than here. You got to take it out someplace, because you take any of those dangerous things and run them into it when they're gasified, and it starts compromising the process. It either kills the biobugs, it slows the process down, makes it less efficient, or you end up with a toxic level in the byproduct that is unacceptable. So you're absolutely correct. You need to get out front on those programs right away, or at least in conjunction with this, because otherwise it'll put some real damages into the process.
And how much of that is caught when it comes into the facility? And it's all separated there as well.
Well, you get both. We have two things working for us, is that you have a very efficient HHW program that's been in existence now for 12, 13, 14 years, where it's not uncommon on a Saturday for us to have between 600 and 1,000 cars lined up bringing their household hazardous waste. And that's become ingrained in the population over there. So that takes a lot of effort. Then the process on the front side, as a company, if you've never seen one of these things, I encourage you to go online or go visit some of them. Probably the most efficient one, or the newest one, is in Maine right now. And if you contact me, I'll give the address. We can use this Recycle America facility in Maine. And these things look like Rube Goldberg operations. I mean, that old kids game that we all had, what was it called, where the thing ducked and turned and spun around and all that. They kind of look a lot like that. They got air sorters and magnetic sorters and chemical sorters and water participation tanks that take the stuff out. So you end up getting an enormous amount of material out of the front side. And that is really key. What you're talking about sending into this thing, into this gasifier, is a carbon-based gasifier. Anything else that you put in it's going to cause you issues. They're all dealable. You can deal with all of the issues. But why make those problems? Take that stuff out on the front side, handle it accordingly, and actually, in some cases, it becomes a source of revenue.
Are plastics incorporated, or is that what?
Now, and one of the interesting things that came about this, I should tell you, when Cliff and I started this program, we had one committee that
Tires are big.
I got to tell you, Mr. Powers and I have gone toe-to-toe on tires. Well, the system loves tires.
Really?
My problem is I don't want any tires to go through it. We have taken years and cleaned up mountains of tires over in our neck of the woods. So, you know, one of the things that we're dealing with is this program, this process is so efficient, they could probably do virtually everything that we're recycling. But the reality of it is we've taken 15 years and millions of dollars to create a whole change in mores over there, and we don't want to go back to that because people become lazy. You know, it's wonderful to say that you have a voluntary recycling program, and Cliff and I testify in our legislature on a weekly basis, it seems, and folks just aren't going to do anything. There's a core group of people that are going to be environmentally aware and they're going to do the right thing. Even in my own family, I have to fight with my wife. A couple years ago, I got into a big kick about we got to set Barbie free. It really ticks me off at Christmas time. We got all these wonderful gifts, and we got Barbie hardwired in and cellophane in and everything. And so I was on this big kick that we have to wrap our packages in recycling matter anymore. Because I don't know about over here, and I don't mean to digress, but I got really ticked off. I went into one of our large party stores over there, and there wasn't a single wrapping paper that they sold that was made out of recycled materials. That's just crazy. That's one of the easiest things that we can do, mandate that all the recycled paper just makes all sense in the world, which technically bars foil-type paper. My wife and my mother sat me down at the kitchen table, and I'm telling you what, I haven't been taking the woodshed like that since I was 10. And I'm telling you what, they said, we'll wrap your packages with the rest of them anymore. We're wrapping pretty.
You've been corrected.
Huh?
You've been corrected.
I have been corrected. I'll fight about any battle on the planet. I'm not fighting those two women. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So how far are you hauling the byproduct, the ash and the non-recyclable materials? How far away is the land?
Well, the recyclable materials will go into the marketplace, and there's a whole system for that. That's a whole industry unto itself. And some of that stuff is, well, in case of some of the fiber, we have a company over there we work with called Activity. It goes all the way up to British Columbia. The ash, right now, contracts are being negotiated between the Allied facility that's there in Newton County that has to go to the landfill, and another landfill that's owned by Veolia that is actually over just south of Warsaw, Indiana. So you're talking 17 to 60 miles, give or take, if that's what it has to be. As again, we hope that when this thing comes up out of the ground, that we're going to be able to take that and use it for roadbed construction, and so there won't be any of it. That's a much closer trip. Okay, and away back.
Two questions. I'm assuming that there isn't one of these facilities currently being used to handle municipal waste in this country.
Well, not on a full-time basis. You have the pilot plant, and it does do municipal solid waste. But it is the pilot plant. It is not. There's not a full-scale operation anyplace.
So how does the EPA set standards for such a new industry, and have EPA permits been issued to anyone thus far?
The facility in Arkansas, since there are virtually no emissions, EPA has reviewed it, and they didn't have to issue an air or a water or a land permit for it. They gave it a buy. It actually produces no emissions whatsoever, but it was reviewed by EPA. This facility that we're building will go through IDEM, which has an air, a land, and a water, and it will have to qualify for those permits that are actually overseen by Region 5 EPA. So it will have to go through that scrutiny. We have no reason to believe that it will be different than what the Arkansas is, but quite frankly, that's one of the battles we'll have to fight as we move forward.
And does the system use water?
Yes.
How much?
1 gallon per gallon of ethanol. 1 gallon per gallon of ethanol.
So how many gallons of water would that be in a day?
4,000, no, probably 4 to 10,000 gallons a day.
Okay.
I'd have to look and see, and it depends. As again, I told you it's staggered out, but it's 1 gallon per gallon of ethanol. So the more ethanol it produces, the more water it's going to consume. Now, it does recycle a bunch of the water that comes in the waste stream, and they have their own wastewater plant built on the facility. It'll actually recycle its own wastewater. It doesn't have a discharge on it. It'll actually recycle its own water, but it is a consumer of water. Substantially better than a traditional ethanol plant. If you're familiar with grain ethanol plants, they take about 3 gallons of water to a gallon of ethanol. This is about a 1.
Could you use wastewater from the sewer plants as a water source?
I would think so. Not being an engineer, I couldn't tell you. Wastewater cakes that come out, the solids.
The stuff that's running into the river, you could use that.
If it's got a discharge from it, yes. Because anything that's being discharged into the river certainly would be clean enough to use in the facility. Yes, ma'am.
Do you take sludge from municipal sewer plants and from there?
You can run waste sludge, yes.
So that we wouldn't have to see it spread on farm fields?
I'm sorry?
We wouldn't have to see it spread on farm fields if it go into your...
It is conceivable, but I've got to be very candid about that issue. That particular product creates the issue that we talked a minute ago about heavy metals much greater. If you're not familiar with that, I'm trying to be not indelicate here, but we all know what goes into the wastewater treatment plant. If you have to go in and have barium tests run in the various hospital, that byproduct ends up in that wastewater effluent in the cake. The problem with the heavy metals is that they don't have a half-life. They continue to build on landfills. Now, if you ran only wastewater cakes back through this facility, you're going to have the same issue. It's going to come out in the ash, and it'll have to be dealt with in a different manner. Right now, those limits that are coming through, the reason they allow them to apply is that on a per-case basis, a per-load basis, they stay under EPA standards. Unfortunately, when you take a farm field that's had it for maybe 10 years, when you look at the solid metal concentration, they have a buildup in those soils. In this case, what happens, some of those materials actually end up bound, and when they're split off from a different compound, so they're able to be utilized in smaller numbers in this process. But I don't want to mislead you that you could take all of your wastewater effluent and run it in through this system without having issues to deal with. Some of them may be insignificant, but depending on that volume as a ratio to the MSW running through it is going to dictate how much of that can go through. But the answer is yes, it can go through, just to what degree. In the back, yes, ma'am.
Has there been any discussion about using existing landfills as feedstock?
Well, there certainly has been that talk. If some of you may or may not be aware, landfill mining is a trend that has started in some parts of the country, but it's not cheap. It is certainly you have the ability, anything that's in a landfill that is organic in nature, you can run, shake it to the front, pull the dirt out, and the material that's in there that's not decomposed, you could absolutely run through this. It becomes a cost to operate it. The places where landfill mining has taken place, and it's predominantly been on the East Coast, is where you've got tipping fees typically exceeding $100 per ton. We don't have that here. So, have there been studies whether this could work? No, it's too new. I suggest as time goes on that is one of the possibilities, but you would see a substantially increased cost over the $17 or $20 a ton. You're probably talking something on the order of $40 a ton. Now, when you're used to paying $100 a ton, $40 a ton seems pretty cheap, where you can get it done for $17 or $20 a ton. It certainly isn't. But the answer is that yes, it could work.
Why does it cost more? I mean, it doesn't have
You got to mine it. You got to mine it. The way landfills are built today, they have what are known as lifts, and then they have dated carbon that goes over the top of it, and they're compacted at a great density. And in order to get the material moved out of there, you've got fuel costs and energy costs to go in there and mine that. You got to shake the dirt out of it, that you can have clean dirt, then you got to run through the process. So the answer is yes, it could be done, but you've got a very labor and expense-laden cost up front in order to get that feedstock. And right now we have garbage to fuel these things for a long time. Yes, sir.
Obama has said that one of his things is green energy, and supposedly, I guess, I don't know if anybody's read all 467 pages of the stimulus plan, but is there any possibility of getting federal aid?
Yes.
And have you applied for it?
We haven't, interestingly enough, because one of the things that went through this entire process is Mr. Powers wanted all of our municipal leaders to realize this was done with private money. And this was, of course, before Obama came out with his new plan. Cliff and I were in a meeting 3 weeks ago with our independent counsel on just exactly that issue. And there is an application that will be made, and it does qualify. At least in our case, and I would certainly think that it would for people in other circumstances. So yes, it would qualify. Whether you can get a piece of that, I guess depends on how effective your Washington contacts are. Other questions? Yes?
Is this a publicly traded company?
Not yet. Not yet. His plan, as he shared with me, is to build 45 of these. He's planning on going public in March of 2014. Other than that, he doesn't have a refinery very much.
Where's he going to get the money to finance them now?
Most of it's done with personal money and with 2 different hedge funds that are behind him. He has a considerable personal wealth. He's a very interesting man. One of his projects is that he owns all of the parking meters in Mexico City. He's very interesting man. Very, very interesting man. He has considerable personal wealth. And then I just visited with his financial group last Thursday in a very long meeting, and as I understand it, there are 2 hedge funds that will be supplying the balance, as well as there are some bonds that are available, but it will all be done with private money.
Well, somebody thinks it's a good idea, and I guess you got all that money.
You know, it's amazing the amount of interest it's been. Everybody starts out with the apprehension, oh yeah, this is snake oil, like we did. And when you get into the literature and start digging into it, you start thinking, well, wait a minute, it works. And when you go down and see the damn place, it's amazing. It was funny when we first started this, they said, well, come to Arkansas and we'll see it. You can see there's no problem scheduling. Now their biggest problem is that the number of Learjets that they've got flying into this place to look at it, you actually have to schedule like 3 months ahead to get people in the work. Every day there are people there, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks. Yes, ma'am.
I'm familiar with plasma art technology.
I am.
What do you think about that?
Well, plasma art is an entirely different process, and it's very expensive. It has an issue with volume. In specialized circumstances, plasma art is very useful. If you have certain mildly toxic waste, it does a great job because it breaks them down. And, you know, it's like taking your Perseverance and with a lightning bolt, there's nothing left. And so it's a very safe technology, but it's very, very, very expensive. So typically you're looking at plasma art, where this is about $40 a ton. The least expensive plasma art I've ever seen is about $80 a ton. And so it becomes, not that it doesn't work, so it's proven technology. It's just that it's probably best applied to specialized waste streams that you don't have this as an option. Other questions?
One more time, Jeff, on what the cost of it, what it's doing at the cost of the municipal budget. If you're going this way, to the residential garbage bill.
Well, that kind of depends on what the municipality does. Our cost of this disposal versus landfill is about 1/3. It's $45 landfilling versus 17 1/4. Now, Mr. Powers has lamented repeatedly and cussed Mr. Newman in his sleep because he cut a really sweet contract. All of the other contracts that they are negotiating, they tell me they're in excess of $22, $23, $24. And I understand. We were the first, we went through a lot of stuff. Cliff is a bastard to deal with in contracts. It's just that simple. The individual municipal budgets, you're talking about taking either your first or second most expensive line item that you've got in your budgets and reducing that cost by about 1/3. And one would theoretically believe that would be passed on to citizens, so I got to believe there'd be up. Then the third piece of that is the revenue coming back in the form of host community fees and tipping fees to the district. That will virtually eliminate our property tax. So financially, this model is just an amazing thing. It does better than anything. As somebody, I forget one of our board members said, we've got 3 or 4 riverboats over our neck of the woods. And they all said, this makes the riverboats look like they're a bad investment. And I think that's true. Other questions? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
I want preface this question by saying that I am asking this with all respect.
Sure.
But I'm sure that there are more than people in the room that are willing to speak up and say, most of the attorneys I know have very little free time in their days. You have talked about going all around the country talking about this system. I guess I wonder
Why?
on behalf of everyone why you would do that for a system that you have not yet tested in Lake County. Is there some remuneration involved?
Not a dime. Not a dime. Cliff and I are employees of the solid waste district. That's what our full-time job is. I will tell you, my background's in high liability insurance. I used to own Lloyd's Brokering House as well as 3 domestic insurance entities. Hated the insurance business, sold it. 1986, went back to law school. When I was in law school, I realized I hated lawyers. I like the law, but I hate lawyers. And I'm an avid outdoorsman. I hunt, fish, and that's so I applied for this job and was the first person hired. Cliff was actually the attorney, one of the county attorneys for it. And I was the first employee hired. And then about 9 years ago, I brought him in-house as a full-time inside attorney. And our board recognizes what we have accomplished and are willing to share that with about anybody. So at this point, I mean, you guys are pretty close. You know, I don't have to get on a plane and have the expenses. If we've got to get on a plane and fly somebody, whatever municipalities ask us to come talk, they have to pay those expenses. But in this case, it's gratis. It's just because our board realizes they've stumbled across an answer that everybody is really realizing, and we don't even get a bonus for coming over here talking, unfortunately. Did that answer it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just wondering what the ethanol you produce, and they look into producing electricity with it instead of putting it back into the fuel supply.
Yes, that's a very interesting question because, you know, when we were in the heat of this, our gas prices were $3 plus a gallon. Everybody realized that ethanol was $1.50 and $2 a gallon. So that was the focus. The beauty of this system is that for some reason, if the ethanol market would just fall down a handbag, which it could be, they can take the same stuff, turn it right around and use it to spin turbines. And the beauty of that is, at that point in time, is it becomes a co-capture system. And the water that you're using, even though it's only 1-to-1, that is just regenerated and used. So it actually becomes another mechanism. So the answer is yes, they've looked at it. At this point, their major focus is about ethanol because they think this is only a temporary lull until the market also create hydrogen. That's right, they can also produce hydrogen. That's a very good point. Other questions? Somebody else had their hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Will we be able to download this material that's in this book?
That is not online. Yeah, if you scan it, then you can download whatever you want. Those were produced by Mr. Powers about a month and a half ago. We made copies of it for everybody. And it doesn't answer all your questions. It gives you a lot of answers. But you can also go to the Powers Energy website. You can also go to the INEOS, I-N-E-O-S. Now you know what he's here for. And INEOS Chemicals website actually has the pilot plant that you can work on. There's a pretty nice little video and digital presentation about that process because it's now owned by INEOS Chemical. And I encourage you all to do that. And keep asking questions. We don't have all the answers. Honest to God, we don't. What you've heard me regurgitate to you here today is a result of probably 100 hearings and thousands of meetings and conversations with people. So we don't have the answers. I've gone from being a naysayer to the point that I'm pretty optimistic about it and I'm excited about it coming forward. But who knows, we could run into something that's going to come. We just haven't found it. All the big questions have been answered.
When do you go online?
As far as 18 months from the day that they dig dirt. So if they break ground in June, you're looking at January. Oh yeah. No, that's the other thing. Somebody said, "We'll let you on a tour." Absolutely, it's being designed so that people can go there. But more importantly, if you want to go to the Arkansas plant, go for a tour. Absolutely, you can do that right now. If you want to put all of you on a bus or a plane and fly down there, and I encourage you to do that. It is a.
I'd love to make that ride on the bus.
Yeah. It's actually a cool bus there. If you call him and tell him what you want to do, Earl's the guy to talk to it, and I think his phone number's in there. Not call my office, not give your Earl's cell phone. He'd love to talk to you. He's just a real he's the guy to deal with. By the way, down in Arkansas, it's at Fayetteville. The facility is less than a mile from the University of Arkansas campus, so if you're worried about it being in a place that there's no smell, there's nothing, unless you know it's there, you don't know it's there.
Is this the place that handles waste with garbage?
No. Yes, sir.
When the plant was initially started down in Arkansas, was there a lot of public apprehension against it, and what's their opinion of it now?
I think you should go to the INEOS website because the mayor of Fayetteville is on there talking about what a wonderful thing it is. I can't speak to whether there was apprehension before because I wasn't there and I don't know. But on the INEOS website that I just told you about, go to that and the mayor of Fayetteville is actually the guy doing the speaking, telling you what a great thing it is.
Oh, that's the mayor.
I don't know if he's the mayor. That's what he officially says. I saw no remonstrance whatsoever when we were there that would indicate that anybody was other than happy. Yes, ma'am.
They have paid campaign operations.
Did you talk about cable confined feeding operation? They will work. They absolutely will work. Because that's not our focus. We haven't spent much time on it, but you'd be better off talking to Dr. Adams about that, Stephen Adams. And one of the reasons that pilot plant was designed so they can run all kinds of feedstocks. And that's one of them. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Don't let anybody tell you that there's nothing you can do about this landfill. You just heard an hour and a half of an earful. There's more we can do even if the Supreme Court doesn't vote in our favor. So thank you for all your direct questions, and make sure you get out there and vote February 24th.